I am Chester Dunham, and this is the Dunham Report, a marketplace of information for labor, civil rights, and other issues of social justice, political education, community activities, and even more. Tonight we do have a good information show for you all, the general public. Got these two gentlemen here. They're going to be talking a little history here tonight, the historian. So we want to share this information with you all. Mr. Thornton, we are delighted to have you back on the show with us tonight, especially with the topics and things we're going to talk about tonight, because we're going to try to educate people on some history, some black history and history period.
Glad to be here.
Because we want the general public to understand the contribution and to contribute the things that minority or blacks done for this country.
Right.
And so a lot of people don't know that, but we want to share that the light, and we want to share that information with you all, the general public. Wes, how you doing, man?
Well, I'm doing fine. And talking about education, I think it would be nice if we would pass a law that required the American government to teach American history to all of the citizens, and cut down on some of the anguish and people not knowing what's going on in the world, not knowing what their history is. So I think it'd be a good idea if we could get the government to insist that everybody teach American history to all the students.
You sure said a lot right then, and like you said, it needs to be, and we can see what we can do even a little more with the education system right here locally in Savannah, since we're going to be talking about a lot of information tonight about Savannah and the part they played during
the struggle,
the struggle, when we first started, and we're going to share that with you all. And then we're going to share modern day. Mr. Thornton is here. He's ready to talk about some modern day stuff too. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that I got there a little late, but I think it was Sunday or last Sunday or something. You
Sunday
at the
before
church,
last.
yeah, you talk about
Black
and
history.
shared some information, and the people was geared for it, because you taught them, or either give them some valuable information that they didn't even know that what was going on. And we're going to share some of that information with the general public tonight.
You know, there were a lot of programs on PBS this week and this month that I wish that we would have some way we could get our young people to watch. When my grandkids come over on the weekends, I make sure that I change over to GPS or PBS and show some of the programs that they're showing on Black history. The kids say they're being taught at school, but they're being taught in a very limited way.
Very good. I'm going to start out by this information here I read, and it's true information, but it said, and we want to talk a little bit about Jamestown, Virginia. This history. She came out of a violent storm with a story no one believed, a name no one recorded, and a past no one investigated. She was mannered by pirates and thieves. Her captain was a mystery man named Jopaz. Her pilot, an Englishman named Marmaduke. Her cargo, an assortment of African Spanish name, and they named these three in the book that I was reading: Antonio, Isabella, Pedro, and then they said 17 others along with them. It was 20 in all. That happened before the arrival of the celebrated Mayflowers, 113 years before the birth of George Washington, and 246 years before the 13th Amendment. This ship sailed into the harbor of Jamestown, Virginia, and dropped anchor into the muddy waters of history. It was clear that this particular ship, it had been, for few ships before or since had landed or either docked in the United States of America. No one knows for sure why the captain, and his name was John Root, that what happened on the high sea, he said that they was in great need of food. So they exchanged cargo. In other words, one ship with these 20 people going to the West India. That's where they was headed.
That's that triangular trade.
Right. That's where they was headed, and they made the swap. So what happened is that when they got the live cargo, and that's the ship that came into Jamestown, Virginia, and that was in 1619.
That's right.
And everybody debated and talk about this because it was during the period of time these individuals were property of someone else. And they did that swap. So there wasn't a part of the slave trade as a whole until later, because right after this, the slave trade started after this, and that's when million after million of slaves then came with the European opening up the avenue when the slaves started coming to this country, and that's when black and our
There was slavery all in the north too now, but they eradicated it.
They were slaves, and right, that is correct. But they really opened up for this area. And the thing that I was listening to today, and they were talking about, is and one of you all, if you want to, can explain the credential servants who were not slaves.
Yeah, indentured service. Persons were from the mother country, England, and they were sent over here. They weren't slaves, but that was punishment for them. They were punished for the indentured service. That's like in prison, really, if you want to make an understanding. And they were here, but they weren't what you call property owned by anybody.
They're probably just like the guys in jail today that works for companies. These people were indentured servants when they came from England.
Exactly.
And they worked their time. They're supposed to be, I think, it was 7 years. 7 years.
I think it was 5 to 7 years that they did. Mostly 7, I think. And then and then they would trade off and get property and other things. And now I'd say, and a lot of blacks was with that group. And that's another thing that people need to understand if they follow history. Slavery almost, but it wasn't like black folks. But slavery was almost every race of people throughout this world.
Oh yeah,
and slave or some form.
Just about every country, people have been in slavery one time or another.
That's right. That's why we want that.
And even worse, some countries have experienced genocide.
Okay.
Yeah,
like in Bosnia, killing people, like Hitler was trying to eradicate the Jewish people from the face of the earth.
Yeah, they're doing it in Southeast Asia right now.
Yeah.
Forget the name of the country.
Genocide,
Yeah, genocide. I think it's Burma. It used to be Burma that they got the problem going on.
We got a lot of that stuff going on in the world today. Man inhuman to man is what it is.
Okay, let's kind of come back and start out. Let's talk about, and we're going to tie this in with Savannah.
Yeah, we're coming on down.
But here's a situation where in 1864 and 63, about Sherman was up in Kennesaw, I think, mountain up in that area right out of Atlanta, in Tennessee. I think right on the borderline. But General Sherman, which was dealing with the war now, and Lincoln had, it was, Lincoln, the election was during that period. I don't think they had, it was right during that period of time when Lincoln became president of the United States.
But I think before we, so we will have to crisscross. let's talk about, before we get to the beginning of the Civil War.
Okay.
And like for instance, abolitionists was trying to get, the first thing in 1857 was the Dred Scott case. He was a slave owned by a doctor, a military doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And you've had a lot.
Yeah, Dred Scott was a little before.
The Civil War.
That was in 1857. 1857.
And what happened?
And the Civil War was in.
What happened? The abolitionists.
All right.
The abolitionists supported him with his case before the United States Supreme Court. See, because he was owned by a military doctor.
Oh, okay, that's right.
And he was transferred from Missouri to a territory. Remember now, before everything, this was a state. States had to get permission to come into the Union, but you had territories. Territories. So Dred Scott was taken to a territory out of Missouri. I think it might have been Illinois. I don't know, but a territory where there was no slavery. So since he went to a territory with no slavery, the abolitionists filed a suit for him before the Supreme Court. And the decision was very hurtful because, and it was true, Judge Taney read it, but it was another judge wrote the opinion. And in essence, it says, you're not a citizen. See, black folk were not a citizen when they came in. They were slaves and chattel
no citizen. That's right.
But they were no citizen.
No.
So you had no right to bring a case before the Supreme Court because you were not a citizen.
You were property.
You were property owned.
That's right.
See, that was the result of the Missouri Compromise. With the Missouri Compromise, they would have slavery to a certain point and it stopped. And then that's when he went into the territory of Illinois, whatever the territory was. And since he went there, he said, since I was over in a free territory, I ought to be a free man. But the court said he was not a citizen, so he had no right to even file a case. Then when you come on down to 1857, then you get the Civil War. Now you're going to talk about that by Lincoln. And Lincoln and Douglas debated. Lincoln was against slavery. Lincoln said, that's what he taught that stuff about House divided against itself cannot stand. Lincoln talked about with Douglas. Douglas was for slavery, and Lincoln was against slavery. That's when the Republican Party came into existence. Lincoln was in the House legislation once, U.S. Representative, and he ran against Douglas for the Senate, and Douglas won the Senate. Right. So at the time of the presidential election, Lincoln had built his name up, and he was even he came to New York and made that great speech at this school. And that was, I read the book where that was the speech that made him an outstanding person for the Republican Party nomination. The speech that he made in New York about a young Republican Party. Yeah. When when you read the book, he came, he looked so slouchy. He wasn't dressed like his suit was just dressed in there.
He was from the rural area of Illinois.
But he came to New York, a big city now. No, he came first.
But he came and he was dressed similar to the way he would be dressed in these other places?
Yes.
Okay.
But he wasn't sharp dressing in New York.
Yeah.
But when he got through making that speech and condemned the South for slavery, they fell in love with him. All the papers recorded that speech. Yeah. Because he was a genius. He was a genius.
Because up to that point, the other guy was winning the election.
But he was a very complex man.
Yep.
And Lincoln was a very complex man. But he would say things like, he would not be a slave, so he would not want to own anybody. One thing he did say in the book that I like what he read, he said, one thing for sure, when you think about it, he said, some people may think that God is for us. The other person knows God is for we. But one thing for sure, God cannot be, as powerful as he is, he cannot be for and against the same thing at the same time. That's what Lincoln said.
All right.
That's a good one. I need to tell it to the modern day evangelicals.
That's a good one.
We need to tell it to the modern day.
God cannot be for this and against this at the same time. And of course, after that, then it's coming down like Mr. Dunham was saying about the Civil War. And what really made America the first time a citizen on paper was the 14th Amendment. 13th did away with slavery.
All right.
The 14th Amendment, then we come on down to your man, Robert Lee now. The first, in the Civil War, And after the Civil War was won by the North, the South. The South knew they didn't have the material nor the industrialization to fight in the war. They didn't have it. Or they had a lot of manpower. Yeah, guys just out of their homes, they're dressed in uniforms, dressed like you and I dress right now. And they fought it for what they believed in, which was wrong.
Now Lincoln, I mean not Lincoln, but Sherman, and that's why we want to talk
They
about
can ask him to take the
but
charge
his
of
march
rebellion down there.
but his march to the sea,
Right.
which is our neck of the woods and our territory.
That's right.
So he was up in Tennessee in the mountains, and so it was in I think the date was September the 2nd, 1864, is when Atlanta fell under the onslaught of Sherman and his troops. He had, and it was Atlanta and Marietta, because it was all right there together. I think Marietta was the first one that he burnt.
He burned Atlanta down to the ground.
And then Atlanta down. Now, there's one thing in those areas that Sherman protected. And what you think that was? And I know you know, both of y'all.
But Savannah?
No, in Atlanta.
What he
Structure,
protected?
buildings.
Oh, a structure?
Yeah.
In Atlanta that he protected, didn't want to destroy?
Yeah.
You got me there. I don't know that.
Okay.
I gave up.
Churches.
Oh, churches.
Yeah. Now it was the White Baptist Church. I think
Okay,
the
I didn't know
First
that.
Baptist Church, which will house black and white. You know, they were slaves anyway, and they would, let them have service and everything else. There's a mixture there. But it was during that period of time, Sherman used that particular church as a hospital.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, but what he did was to make sure to bring the black church from under the white church and being, owned and other words, controlled by the church itself. It was Zion Baptist Church, I think. He made sure that he separated those and saved the structure. So on his way to the sea, in the two areas that he came, he preserved, if it was a black church structure or something, he would leave it.
Okay.
And so when coming out of Atlanta, headed this way, that's what he did. Now he had about 60,000 troops.
And it was spread all across.
And it was spread all across. Now what he did, like you're talking about the Union and what have you, what he did was plantation, slaves on the plantation. By the time he got, like you said, each all those areas that he came, but what he would do is have some of his service people, different ones to go and talk to blacks on those plantations. And what they did, they couldn't march or be involved directly with the soldiers, but they used them as scouts and they used them as craftsmen and all different type of things. They're skilled in what they knew, so they used them for all of those things. So by the time he wouldn't have been successful if it wasn't for the help of those slaves.
And not only that, during the Civil War, the Massachusetts 54th Regiment in Massachusetts,
Yeah,
they fought brilliantly for their own freedom.
yeah.
A lot of the black men lost their lives to maintain this union.
Well, you remember
In fact,
that?
when Lincoln was assassinated, I read the book, the Massachusetts Regiment took the lead in procession at the funeral. You didn't know that, did you?
No. So now, no, I sure didn't.
I did not know that either.
No. So now when Sherman, I forgot that, but he left Atlanta on or about November the 15th, 1864, after setting fire to Atlanta, like you say, burn that down, and now he's on his way to the sea. With 60,000 troops plus another 40,000 slaves and what have you, short of food and a lot of other kind of things. But when he got here to Savannah, this show you how things happen. Now you had a lot of blacks in the city of Savannah who had bought their freedom
Yeah.
and who were free, and especially church people, and especially preachers.
Yeah, brother,
So,
preacher,
yeah, the preachers who were educated in some other things, so they took the lead. So what happened is when he got here, they read and they understand what was going on. They knew that Sherman was on his way to the sea. They knew he had already burned Atlanta down. They knew about Lincoln election and all of the. They knew about all of these things. And so what they did was when it was 3 ministers. Reverend Campbell was the lead person. I think he was.
He was on the pastor of the church.
He was 51, but he was the lead pastor.
First Time Baptist Church.
Yeah, and 2 more. He got with them and he said, let's see if we can get a meeting with General Sherman. Now, there's some nerve. This day and time, you can't get modern people to talking about the nerve for them hauling, but meet up with a damn general at the head of the army and all this kind of stuff. so you can't. So here's the situation where these 3 met up with Sherman and had a conversation. That's how this big meeting started. It got to happen. So they told him that who they were, their name and everything else, and they
You
would
start questioning them and asking them their feeling about slavery and how they were treated and what were their expectations.
Well, they didn't get involved too much with that. They just wanted to introduce themselves and feel him out and let them know that they would, if you need them to be involved or something like that, they'll be available. They would like to, help the union and the new president and all these different things. And it was a short conversation, and they left. This rich merchant, his name was Charles Green, I think he was. He's the one that owned this place where this mansion that Lincoln had his headquarters, used for his headquarters. And he didn't want this place
You mean
destroyed.
Sherman?
Sherman, yeah. He didn't want the property destroyed. So he wanted to preserve it. He done sent his family and everybody up north.
Yeah.
So he met Sherman in the in a hotel, and they had a conversation. There was a conversation. He done met with the 3 black, and now he's meeting with this rich merchant. And so he told him he had the perfect place for him to use as his headquarters if he wanted to use it. And he knew the man could have burned it down, take it, or do anything he wanted to do. So Sherman sent some of his people over there and took a look at it. So he told him, said, okay, he'll use it. And he said, only thing he needed was just a room for him and a servant or what have you. So that's the place that Sherman used for his headquarters. During that time, Lincoln had started moving around because now this is almost a year, because he did his speech, the emancipation speech. He did that on January the 1st, 1863. Now this is almost a year. This is a year later. So it was pressure on Lincoln too. And Frederick Douglass was one of the main one pressing him about the situation, what he was going to do. But he done did the emancipation, he done did all of this, but he was kind of sitting there not doing anything. So now, after Sherman got to Savannah, Lincoln knew that he had to do something. So what he did was he sent his Secretary of War. His name was Edward Stanton, right? Like you said, an abolitionist, he sent him there. And he didn't stay until about 5 days. He got here on January the 11th on a ship. And he left January the 15th. So when he got here, he was the one to get with Sherman and see what they can do about the President Emancipation Proclamation and explaining all these things. Now, he knew that Sherman had all of these ex-slaves with him right there. So what he did was something had to be done. So he sent his Secretary of War to Savannah to meet up with Sherman and then see how they can bring this stuff together so far as implementing the emancipation. So that's when this other meeting, when the Secretary of War asked Sherman, do you know any blacks since you've been here? No, you've been here for a short period of time, but do you know any other black kind of intelligent and, and stuff like this? And I would like to set up a meeting with some of them. And Sherman thought about the three blacks, Reverend Campbell and those. He thought about them. And he went to Campbell. And that's when that meeting came with the 20 blacks.
Mm-hmm.
They were invited at the Green Mansion, which is where Sherman used as his headquarters. They was invited there and to talk about this thing. And they said that these guys were sharp as a tack. They came, they walked, some of them walked, some of them came with the mules, some of them came with horses and drawn carrots, but they came, 20. They were pastors and assistant pastors of the church, and they named the churches. I think at that time it was something like 5 churches in the city of Savannah.
Well, the first AB was running second half
yeah,
of the Baptist.
Yeah, second and
I know those two were
yeah. And the Episcopal churches, they changed the name. They, but it's the same. But that congregation was one of them too.
And don't forget, when Sherman took Savannah, he gave Savannah to Lincoln as a birthday present.
Well, he gave Atlanta.
Yeah,
he gave Atlanta to him as a
Savannah.
Well, he gave Savannah too, but he had already. What he told him that automatically Atlanta was his because they done destroyed that. So they had that in the car. And you're right, but so far it's given Savannah.
Yeah,
because they didn't know.
We need to remember that the general coming from Atlanta, he caused a lot of black people and slaves to be killed up here at Ebenezer Creek.
Yeah, we're gonna hit to that, West, because I want you to dramatize when we went to the thing out there. And so what happened is that when the conversation went on that night, they got there, must be early in the afternoon of that night. And they said this meeting, they said in the wee hours of the morning. That's how long it lasted.
Mm-hmm.
They picked Reverend Frazier to be the speaker for the ministers. They picked, all of them had something to say, but they picked him to be the
spokesman for the whole group.
Right. It was the Secretary of War who was asking the question, and I think he had a general or something taking notes and all of this sort of stuff. Well planned. So when the question was asked, explaining if they understood what, the emancipation, and so Frazier just ripped that thing off just like bam, 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 bam. And when they got through with that, he understood right then, these guys are super. So what he did then was to ask, if you all now are ex-slaves, how would you be able to survive and take care of yourself? But all the time you was on the plantation, you was on the owners and this and that. You ain't got to worry about food and survive and this and that. How in the world are you going to be able to deal with Lincoln Emancipation Proclamation being free? You don't have nothing. And they said, well, it's simple. Frazier said again, what we need is land. We do that every day. We need seed to plant. And they even told them about they need special type of land, the soil and the till of the soil and all these kind of things they were talking about. And we need a mule. I don't know why they said the mule.
We got 4 acres in it.
Yeah, so they said the mule. So they said, well, okay, if you get the land and all of these other kind of things, where would you like to live? Would you like to live amongst the white or this or that? And they said, no, with all the prejudice and this and that, that we think we would like to live among ourselves. All of the preachers except one, who was a northerner who came here, and he was the one that disagreed that, live among the people. And he said he didn't understood, he was when he was talking, because coming from up north and coming from somewhere else. But anyway, when all of this were done, Sherman, then they could say, okay, that's when we're talking about now, the field order 50 and everything, which you'll get into that. So from that night, from that time, they decided then to give blacks, ex-slaves, land from way up in South Carolina, 30 miles inland, and then all of the island, everything. That's why, all of that land was given to them to, I think it's St. John River. I believe that's going into Jacksonville. But the land was given to blacks.
That's what constituted the 40 acres of the mule.
Yeah, the 40 acre of the mule was done that night in that meeting. But to justify it and put it on paper, I think it was the next day or the very next day or something, they did that at St. John, Second Baptist. Because you see that the information out there is where they went and had this big meeting in that park. And the spokespeople were there, and that's when Sherman did that and signed, and they called it Field Order 15.
Which was never instituted.
Now, one of the reasons, and Wes and I talk about that, and we can get into that, one of the key things why it wasn't that, because of Lincoln being assassinated.
Yeah.
See, because land was given, whole lot of land was given. That's how all the island and all these other places, a whole lot of land was given. But they cut it off, and when they cut it off, after the assassination of Lincoln, Johnson then told all of the other ones who, plantation owners and everybody else, that they can come back and reclaim their land if they be a part of the Union.
If they were,
But it was a different,
if they would pledge allegiance to the Union.
So any of y'all can pick up and started talking about that. That's what happened during that period of time.
But I wanted to talk about a little bit about the atrocity that occurred up at Ebenezer Creek.
Oh yeah. Let's talk about that.
Sherman had about 60,000 slaves and other people with him. What he did is that he put a pontoon bridge across Ebenezer Creek to let his troops go across. And then he let all the black craftsmen cross and behind him. Then he pulled up the bridge, leaving all the women and children on the other side. Now, there's some stories about who massacred them. The Sherman troops massacred the blacks, or did it? What's the Southern General?
Davis.
You understand what I'm saying? That they had all these troops over there, and he
two generals, and the name was the same. But just like you said, it was two of them.
It was two of them.
And the thing about it,
all these people that were left behind.
What happened is they would let the women and children come across, and once they got all their craftsmen across and all the troops across, they took up the bridge, trapping all the women and children on the other side where the Southern troops were. So now we don't understand.
That's what killed them, man. You can imagine.
Well, see, Sherman had to end up going to court and a lot of other kind of things to prove that he didn't give.
That's
right. It was this general.
Done that now when he
because they said this general said this general. And they said the two generals said one was just different from night and day. One was pray every day and church man, did everything right, and the other one just like the devil himself. And that's what happened. They said that devil, that's the one that ordered to pull those pontoons and things up. And that's when when all that happened. Because Wes and I went out there and looked at all of this area. Because we supposed to do something later. And do pictures of it, a movie type of thing.
Well, we got a program.
We want to show the whole thing, how it happened and where it happened.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
And what has happened is if you ever go to what's called Ebenezer Road in the FM County, that's where the oldest Lutheran church in the country is located. but
Yeah.
you'll find out that there are troops, both American, northern troops and southern troops that are buried beside each other along Ebenezer Creek. There are graves everywhere. You can find them if you go up there with the electronic equipment. But most people don't know about that.
Yeah, first time I heard it, and I read a lot of things.
Well, I want to get you. We need to show him that film that we did. The Lutheran Church did a whole thing on that.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
And then after that happened, when and these black, the troops, the ones who joined the Union, they took off going up state and whatever they did, and history will tell you about all the trillion things that they did and stuff like that. We just wanted to kind of shed a highlight on things happened right here in Savannah, and wanted to share that light for the people to know history and the involvement of things right here in Savannah, because the first black on land in Savannah was Reverend Andrew Bryant.
Yeah.
Reverend Andrew Bryant, the first black who owned land was Reverend Andrew Bryant. And blacks contributed and did so much in this city, in this surrounding county, in this area. So that's why we try to highlight and make sure that, and we want to talk about some things, like you said later, right, in a few minutes, about local stuff of people, because the history of, I want you to come back to that. The history book will back up the thing that we're talking about now, history all over. But we just want to share something, and I want you to come and say something. And we want to talk about some highlights, some things that in Savannah area and what happened, an individual who that basically a lot of us see them or heard about them or something like that and didn't know. And we want to make sure that we talk about those.
The sad thing about this whole epic about black people, slavery, disgusting when you think about it, and you look, we talked about the Dred Scott case, 57, and he lost, but they kept marching. I read a book titled The Unfinished March. Okay. And we're still marching. Even in the 21st century, we are still dealing with
You're right.
Now, when the Plessy case, this was the backbone of the black man freedom right here. When the Plessy versus Ferguson case, that was in 1896.
1896.
Now, that's way after the 14th and 15th Amendment, 13th Amendment, 1865, and 1468.
That is right.
Now, here we go, 30-something later, 1896.
That's right.
Black folks thought they were free with the 14th Amendment. That's the only amendment made you a citizen then. You actually a citizen. I think of how we have been treated. Okay, 1896 was the Plessy versus Ferguson. And what that case was, it was a young man named Homer Plessy. And he was not a black man, but he was a mulatto. In Louisiana, where he had a lot of mixed races all in Louisiana, brown and all of that. So he gets on this train, and the conductor come in and collected tickets, and saw him. And so many words, sir, saw that Rosa Parks. Morning Rosa Parks, you got to move. You got to move to the other coach. He said, well, I got to move. I'm not going to move. I got my ticket. The number of white folk was on there, and the only black folk you saw in that coach were ladies who were taking care of children.
All right.
So he refused to move, so they arrested him. And here come the abolitionists again. Okay. They got behind him with a cold case. Yeah. And the Supreme Court ruled against him, because the Supreme Court made up of 9 people. 5 of them were Southern racist Democrats. And the decision was 5-4.
We got
Hold on.
Wait a minute, let me finish.
I want you to come right back to that, but I'm going to just remind you of one thing, and the viewing audience also, is that was in 1896.
Yes, but after that decision...
I'm coming back to you.
All right.
Coming back to you. 1890, and I just want you all to know today, it is
19.
20, yeah, right. February the 13th or what have you, 2019. So the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, and we just put somebody else on the court just the other day, and we still have the same thing.
Same
And I just wanted to mention that.
Same equation.
Same thing
Same
right
equation.
now.
Sure.
All of those years, and
All
we
those
figured
years.
that the court would be just for everybody.
Yes.
But we don't have that.
All right. Well, just like when that thing with Bush, I mean, they had 5 judges. As a Republican, they gave it to Bush. With Al Gore and that situation in Florida. But back to 1896, they ruled against him and said that because he was on this coach, this would really destroy black folk. That decision, 1896, because they came up with the separate but equal. It was always separate, but never equal.
Okay, I'm
And
gonna ask
after that,
you.
wait a minute, after that, when that decision came out, they gave them a highway to segregate everything, theaters, swimming pools, restaurants, everything you could think of. 1896 is separate but equal. But it was never, I wish I'd have brought the book here tonight to show you in Camden County when Thurgood March in the Market case about separate equal, that school system, how many thousands of dollars they were spending on each white child and virtually none on a black child. But how can you have separate? It was never equal.
Now hold your point. 'Cause
Always separate.
Hold your point, because I'm
Definitely.
coming back to you. So I want you to, I'm coming west too, but I want you to hold your point. In order for us, because you talk about the 13th and 14th Amendment, we just got through talking about
Sherman and
Sherman, and we got through talking about Lincoln and all of that. So it was segregation for a period of time. It wasn't until after, I think it was around about 1866 or somewhere along in there, is when blacks, male, fought for the right to vote and won that through the court, won that. So in order to get to the point to where things were good so far as going to libraries, going to school, doing all of these kind of things in a segregated, not segregated, but environment dealing with race and stuff. What the word I'm looking for? It was integrated. All of that stuff was integrated. So until we got to 1896.
And that
So
went on.
tell us. I want you to explain. Tell us about Reconstruction, because the Reconstruction period is what give us the right to do these other
When the
things.
Reconstruction period came in after the Civil War.
Well, that's what I'm. Well, that's what
But
I'm talking
before
about.
1896,
Yeah,
you had the
but-
Reconstruction. You had black people were able to vote. You had black
That's
people in
what-
the legislatures
that
in
was
these
after-
southern states.
that's what I'm
after
talking
Civil
about.
War. And of course, when that 1896 came in, that ruined everything. They displaced everybody. And what really, that's one thing that ruined black people. And the election of 1876, that was another thing that destroyed us. You had the election between Rutherford Hayes and a man named Tilden. He was a Democrat and he was a Republican. And we talked about it earlier tonight when you were talking about the Northern Democrats and the Southern Democrats. They got tired of fighting for black folk rights or whatever. They were losing money, and back to that money again. And they said, okay, you had an election about to wind up in the House of Representatives. And they wanted Rutherford Hayes to win. So they made a deal. The Southern Democrats, Northern Democrats and Republicans turned their black on black folk. Republicans did, that's still like it is. And they voted, it's okay, we'll pull the troops out the South. We want you to get the troops out the South. If you pull the troops out the South, then we'll support you, Hayes. And that's what happened. When he became president, he pulled the troops out of the South, and that's when you had the Klans and all that stuff started. And black folk, again, We're disenfranchised. I mean, we've been a struggling people ever since we've been here. And what got me, like I read the book on Brown versus Board of Education.
Before we get to Brown versus the Board of Education.
When that 1896 decision,
I know it.
That went on for 85 to 86 years.
Yeah.
Almost a century. You think about it. And then what got me when I get so angry, when I think about it.
1954.
When I think about it, when I was in the military, I like to read, so you didn't make that much money. I was in Germany, so I spent a lot of my time in the library, and all of the things were really ran by civilians, and it was a German captain. He and I became very good friends, and he and I were talking about the war and everything. He never met Hitler. He said he hated Hitler, but he had to go into service. He was drafted, and they knew they were losing the battle when they didn't have any gas to run their vehicles, and they had to use oxen to pull up the hill of supplies and everything. So he asked me, I should never forget, he said, what part of the country you live in? I told him the South. You know what that man told me?
What?
He said, that's when they treat you people pretty bad down there, don't you? I had to tell him the truth, yes. And he said, well, how do you think I felt with this? He said, I could go down to the South right now, because he's a librarian, so he did a lot of reading. He said, I can go to the South right now and go places where you can't go.
That's right.
Just think about that.
Well,
Just think, that's like when I read that book, The Brown versus Education, and Thurgood Marshall asked a man at one of the universities.
Before we get to that, I want to hear
Just let me say that. Ask him, was it what a school? Tell me about some of the races of people you have in your school. Chinese, people from Manila, the Philippines. They came to my country and lived better than me. And all the work black folk did to build this country.
Well, what you're talking about is really just giving us an idea of why we cannot let white people get away with thinking that if they live in the North, they're better than the whites in the South. Because to me, the fact that they kept so silent during Reconstruction spoke as bad as you could be. In other words, white people in the North want us to believe that they were for us.
Oh, no.
They're quiet, what I call it. They were so quiet about it, they let them run all kinds of stuff on us, all the problems we had in the South. You understand what I'm saying?
That's true.
I'm saying that if they had spoken up, they would have done something for us, but they didn't do anything. Just like I tell people nowadays, they look at all the police academies and whatnot. The police were part of the suppression of us.
That's true.
And so when they talk about, hey, you need to do this for the police, I said, if you get GBI, SLED, Mississippi Investment Court, and all those people, I guarantee you can go back there, you could solve a lot of murders and things in the South if they would just open those books.
The trees could talk.
Yeah. And so people need to understand that we have a right to complain about the whites in both North and South, and we have nothing to be ashamed of. They have treated us like trash. And our government has been complicit in that.
I put all my problems that we ever had as a people at the foot of the U.S. government. Because every article in that Constitution, should have brought my Constitution book, every article in there tells you that Congress should have the power to enforce this article or this amendment with proper laws. Mm-hmm. So Congress sat down and didn't do anything. Why? Because they try to always appease the South.
Well,
just right, they had to put the country together. Mm-hmm. And the man said, well, they talked about slavery. How can you have a democracy with second-class citizens? How can you have a democracy with slavery? How can you have a democracy? And Thomas Jefferson wrote that thing, all people born with unalienable rights.
Well,
but then you have slavery. Like the man shot me this morning. 10 presidents of the United States. I never really researched that, but I know Jefferson had Sally Hemingway, took away a woman, black woman. He was in love with that woman. He had that woman 2 or 3 children. She had him more. And they finally took that woman's Sally ancestors into their family reunions. But 10 presidents. 10 had slaves. Started with Jefferson, started with George Washington.
Well, you just said something. Wes probably might have said it too. You just said something just a few minutes ago.
What's that?
And I don't know whether the viewing audience paying attention to what you just said a few minutes ago. I'm going to ask a question, go back and ask the question. voting, if they deny you the right to vote, I mean anybody.
They're doing that today.
Wait a minute, I'm gonna finish. I said, don't you consider yourself a second-class citizen, or either somebody who's not equal to a person who can just walk in there and go and vote?
Wait, that's when they look at you when you vote. They
right.
did everything to disenfranchise you.
Okay,
You had to get the Voting Right Act and all that stuff.
I just said that just to prove a point.
Yeah.
Now, the key thing is,
You ought to be.
and I hope that you, the viewing audience, would pay strict attention. It was not until 19, almost 1920, somewhere along in there before they got it straight, before white
Women couldn't vote.
female, white female could
Could not
not
vote.
vote.
Yeah.
But I just want people to understand. I just hope this is history. We're talking, and I'm talking to black folks, white folks, Caucasian, everybody. This, on the different races. So that's what I just wanted to. So it doesn't matter sometimes, because I look at women sometimes and they straighten some of the stuff up. But
I'm
see,
so glad
they
you
were
don't do
denied the right to vote. And who did that? They're people.
I'm so glad to
White
see
male.
so many women won election this last time. But
Yes.
all these women in the Congress today.
Okay, I'm going to make a connection for you all right here. The immigration policy that we are trying to enforce today, that was what the whole fight South was about. Too many blacks don't get to vote, or vote very white to the back.
I can't hear what you say now.
Black folks voting in the South. That's what it was all about. So they were trying to determine how many people are going to have vote right to vote. Think about this. This is the same thing that's going on today when they're trying to keep brown people from coming to the South already.
Oh, sure.
So what they're doing is that at that point in time, it was how many people could vote. All these black folks that have voted in the South. This is the same thing that Donald Trump and them are going through today. They don't want all these brown people coming from the South. So
Absolutely.
They're going to outvote the white race. That's what it's all about.
That's the bottom line.
So we got immigration policy in the Senate again.
That's right. And just like you say, all of these different rules and things they put in place to deny your rights and your privilege in order to vote.
Yes.
Because
That's
diluting that, they're doing that because they know right now if they count the people of color, they're gonna, that's right. And see, that's what it is. And they knew this. So I mean, instead of being fair and go about it, but they're still holding on, trying to do everything
have
they
all this stuff
can.
written
Just in the state of Georgia. Just look at the other day that
Look what
the
that
person
man- sure.
who won the governorship, that shouldn't be the governor because
It's oppressing the vote.
That's right.
It's oppressing the
That's
vote.
exactly what happened in the state of Florida also.
Yeah, it's
and
oppressing
some
the vote.
other places.
So just like I always told Chester, I said already, we don't have to worry about them suppressing the vote if we can get black people to the polls. There's more black people in the South than any other place else, and in the state of Georgia. If we could get them to go to the polls, we wouldn't worry about this damn boy trying to suppress the vote.
Yeah, that's true.
So we got a lot of this on our back ourselves.
Well, we got a lot of work to do because
Got a lot of
we
work
still
to do.
got to.
You know,
we still got to get them educated and get them right.
I think we need to get out the black vote, get out the black brother vote.
Say it again.
We need to get out the black brother vote. But you said so.
Everybody got to vote.
So you had something because before this show go off, I want you to do.
Oh, this article here
something
that,
you wanted to.
You know, I subscribe to, I guess a lot of our listening audience also may be a member of the AARP. That's an associate
yeah,
retired
that's all
people.
over. The show is all over, so that's all
Yeah.
over, and that's good.
Sure.
Whatever you wanted to say, yeah.
No, I was just saying that the article, really what the article says that grandparents should tell their children about our history. They should tell their children about the struggles that we had to do in this country, so they will learn and know what's going on. And they have never had the right to do the things that they're doing now. See, we have experienced segregation. Get on the bus. I remember one time I was going, when I was going to Savannah State, I had to go to East Front Street School, and Ms. Ida Gasson was the supervisor, was on the field doing the study. And I got right on the bus on Anderson and West Broad. The Broad Local. That bus went on through on the black neighbors, you know that, all the way down and turned East Broad, right back to Broad, then right around the circle. So nobody was on the bus but 3 or 4 women going to work. So I just sat down around the front. The man still driving the bus. You got to move to the back. Listen, drive this bus. I got to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, and it was about 8:30. And so I just knew I was gonna go to jail. So I told the ladies back there, this man holding up this bus, I gotta get on my job. So I was sitting up in the front. Nobody was on the bus but 3 other women and myself. So when he got off the bus, I thought he was going to call a police officer. So, but he went across the street and used the phone. And after a while, this white man came on, Mr. Carmichael. I never forget it. He was over the transit department at that time. He was a Jewish man. So he came and he boarded the bus. What's going on? I said, well, you don't see no black people in here, and I'm sitting in this seat right here. Not the side seat, but the first one on the side. And this bus runs in the black neighborhoods. So why he can't go in and drive this bus? And then I told him, I said, look here, sir, I am supposed to be at East Broad Street at 9 o'clock. You know what that man did? Put me in his Buick car, took me there. And he said, I'll be glad when the day come when that mess and signs come down off of these buses. And eventually they did. But you have to work at things to get things done. You just can't. Freedom is never given automatically. You have to demand it.
And I think that's what's wrong with us today. We'll do a lot of easy things. We feed homeless people. We'll make sure that people get this and they get that. But when it comes down to forcing the government to take care of the people, they give them affordable housing, all the things that mental illness and things like this, we don't do it.
And you look at countries what I can't understand. I look at a country like Haiti with all that hurricane devastated that country. And we get billions and billions of billions. We tore up Europe. And then we came with the Marshall Plan. When the Soviet Union blocked the Autobahn, when troops couldn't, you had to go through East Berlin to get to West Berlin. Mm-hmm. So you had that border line. And so what Khrushchev and them did, they would let the U.S. government travel on that Autobahn to go through East Berlin to get to West Berlin. So President Truman had the airlift. Mm-hmm. Plane every hour, flying food all into West Berlin. So the point I'm mentioning is this, that they spend all that money to do that, but they don't spend that down in Haiti worth nothing. And that's the only thing I had against Conversaion Wright, who was Secretary of State. Very little to give Haiti. But if Haiti had something that America need, if they had all, they could give something, you'd have more money to know what to do with. So,
well, we got to remember what really happened to Haiti. Wasn't Haiti under the French rule?
One time.
Yes, okay. When Haiti had a revolution, they were the first black organization to beat a white superpower. And
a lot of the Haitians right on that monument in the square by our church.
Yes, right.
The Haitians fought in the American Revolution.
But I'm trying to say that
they have free America from the British.
But I'm trying to tell you what's going on in Haiti. At that time, Napoleon got together with all the British forces and all the powerhouses of Europe, and said we're not going to let Haiti become a success because we don't want anybody to ever think that a black country can beat a white power.
A lot of people starving now, and it's a shame.
See what Crenshaw was talking about, and we did some research on this thing. We did a program. We knew we was going to do the show. We will, be more ready for it. But definitely so, because see, the Haitian, because like you said earlier, is a lot of mulatto people, or either people with fair skin versus darker race people, and they all are Haitian, but the thing about it, they discriminate over in that country.
You know the thing that got me though?
They discriminate in that country, so all of this fell in place during that particular time, and that's what happened with the Haitians in the other countries, because the Haitian themselves, some of them, was split.
Well, you always have that even in America. Look at what we have in Charlottesville, Virginia.
So that's
look at what we have down there.
So I mean, if you're doing a show on it, because there's a lot of things that happen in that country, and still happening now, and especially those other ones who are in control, and some of the other countries still in control, financially and other kind of things.
You know, the thing that got me, this country was supposed to found on a religious basis, the word of God. You know, like I was talking to my doctor the other day, the lady doctor, and we got to talk about this situation in Virginia.
We're gonna have to and pick it up on the next show.
Next show, but anyway.
Yeah. You, the viewing audience, had been watching the Dunham Report, where you, the community, come first, keeping a focus on the future. So, subscribe to our channel, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Instagram. See you on the next show. Thank you.